Yeah, there was a draft that went in. 10 of these guys from the scouting grounds are drafted. Now, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to play on any of the LCS squads, but they basically have a 21-day window. They have the exclusive rights, whatever team drafted them, to have first dibs to sign these guys. And then after that period, they'll head back onto the open market. And maybe other teams will pick them up then, maybe not.
And it was interesting right away because you can tell that different teams have different opinions on this draft. I mean, Cloud9 obviously very interested in acquiring these picks. They picked up 2 extra picks, one from Flyquest to start things off, and then another one from Optic, and even Clutch Gaming. They acquired the 4th overall pick as well. So some teams really using this to try to build their academy roster, and other teams, like the ones who sold their only picks, Flyquest, Optic, GG's, Golden Guardians, also getting rid of them and just going to build their academy roster some other way. So it was an interesting beginning to this whole scouting grounds draft thing, different teams prioritizing different players, and even for teams like CLG, when you actually work with some of these players, because obviously TSM, Cloud9, CLG, and Optic kind of worked with their own teams. And then from there, do you go after guys from other teams that performed really well in these games, or do you just decide, you know what, I worked with this guy, I coached him throughout this process, and I liked what I saw, do I pick him up instead? So you kind of saw that throughout this entire weekend.
Yeah, and for a team like Cloud9, 3 guys, as you mentioned, they're picking up. So you've got to think some of these guys are going to find a spot on their academy roster. They ended up picking League, a top laner, for the first overall pick. So you got to think, I mean, top lane is kind of one of the main question marks that Cloud9 has had since Impact left, and now Licorice is the starting guy. So maybe they're confident in League as a sub guy that could maybe come in if Licorice really struggles, but I still don't think he'll ever be seeing the starting roster.
No, but again, it makes sense if you're Cloud9. You don't have a ton of question marks. Obviously, you have Jensen, Sneaky, Smoothie in that bottom half of the map, and then Licorice is the one question mark with Impact leaving, and they couldn't get an import, obviously, because they already have 2 with Sven, Skaren, and Jensen, so they pick up League just in case, and he's a good building block for that academy team as well. The funny thing was in the broadcast when Cloud9 went jungler in their 9th pick, or 9th overall pick, and
who's on the desk?
Wiggly, who they already picked up for the academy team, was sitting there being like, wait a second, does that mean that I'm not on the team anymore? But again, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to join that roster like you said, Eric. It's just they have the exclusive right, so if they want to pick you up, they can. They can move those rights to another team. So there's a lot of things going on.
This whole draft was very awkward.
Yes.
They're really trying to emulate and rip off some of the professional sports draft days that they have, but it doesn't work quite as well when no one's in the crowd. It was literally just the 20 players and 10 of them getting selected, and it was empty. So it was a very weird ambiance and atmosphere in the LCS studios when it's empty.
Yeah, I mean, it is still a step towards trying to merge with regular sports. It was like an assimilation of sorts into what the NFL does, what the NBA does, with this whole commissioner moving onto the stage. Cloud9 is now on the clock. He was very monotone and kind of boring and even terrifying at times when he just stared at the camera and was like, the draft is now over. Oh, all right, I guess we'll leave.
He was a robot.
He was a robot. It was kind of bizarre, but you know, even having 5 minutes to make your pick, even though most teams already knew what was going on, it's still a step in the right direction of trying to become a real sport. But you could tell even in the comments of some of these VODs, people not understanding at all what's going on, saying, how come Cloud9 had 3 picks and some had 0?
That's because just really unbalanced. It's not fair at all.
Yeah, because Cloud9 just straight up bought the spots. It wasn't even trades. It's just, hey, we'll buy it from you. All right.
Yeah, it seems like, at least right now, these draft picks aren't even worth trading an actual asset. Yeah, it's like, hey, man, give me $500 for that. Ooh, okay. Good deal, good deal. So, I mean, yeah, Cloud9 and Clutch making up half of these picks. They've made up 5 of these picks going forward, so maybe they're looking more at grooming this talent. Obviously, with that 9th pick with Blabberfish, which is a totally ridiculous name, and I love it. But maybe he's going over to some other team because, yeah, there's no way that Cloud9 is actually going to sign him, I don't think, when they already have Wiggly for that academy team. So maybe another team wanted him. We have no idea what's going on with the behind the scenes. Maybe Cloud9 just wanted to move up for some of these guys, and then they're moving Blabberfish to another team. But I'm not so sure how invested any of these teams are going to actually be in these draft picks going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Cloud9 situation with Firefish too. Was one of those scenarios where, we already got 2 guys for this academy roster, and now do we just get someone else who's like the next best available, even if he doesn't fit our roster, and try to flip him later down the road, or do we get someone who's maybe not as good as Fish and just stick him on the roster and say, whatever, there you go. But it looks like they're gonna just pick him up and move him. But one guy I want to talk about before we kind of shift off the scouting grounds thing is NintendudeX.
He's coming.
Mr. Irrelevant. With the 10th overall pick and the last one. It was a pretty long draft. Boy,
It took at least 3 hours.
Yeah.
Although it did last like an hour.
It did, yeah. It was a full thing. But Nintendude is kind of back. And it's interesting because he's going to CLG where you have Rainover on the main roster. I thought it'd be Omar God in the academy roster.
I think it still will be.
It probably still will be, but at least Nintendude is a guy who can actually kind of collaborate with a guy like Rainover and bring new ideas because he's got that LCS experience. He's been around for a while. And he kind of surprised some teams being showing that he still has something left in the tank, despite a few years off the LCS table. So good for him to actually get back to the pro level. CLG picks him up. We'll see if he ever gets some academy time.
Yeah, obviously he's a different case than pretty much anyone else at the scouting grounds where he has that professional experience. And we'll see if teams are willing to take a risk on him. It's probably less of a risk to go with him than some of these other guys because he has at least proven that on stage talent and skill.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more esports content.